Okay, better late than never, right? Let's talk about what I read in the month of November, which included some surprising things that I wasn't expecting, as well as I finally got around to finishing a book that I had started in August. Let's talk about it. All right, so first up, let's talk about The Dark That Dwells by Matt Digman and Ryan Roddy. So this book was given to me, shoot, I believe it was December of last year. So wow, this took me forever to get around to. And I finally went to pick it up in August. I put it on my TBR to finally get around to it. I had heard pretty good things about it. Ultimately, it wasn't the best book for me. I just, for whatever reason, and this honestly hasn't really happened too often to me, I just couldn't get into it, which is odd because it seems like this would be right up my alley. You've got, several different POVs. You blend sci-fi and fantasy, adventure, lots and lots and lots of action, and just really cool sci-fi concepts that remind me a lot of video games that I've played. I think I mentioned this book in one of my previous videos, some kind of wrap up where I didn't quite finish it, but I hadn't gotten into it. It just, the concepts are really cool. The whole divide between the worlds and the technology and the straight up magic that exists, because again, you're blending science fiction and fantasy. It just, to me, it felt like there were too many pages of just random battles where it actually felt like a random encounter in a video game where you're not really that invested. You're just kind of leveling up and you're fighting random enemies, and it's not impactful. You don't want to just do that. You want more story. And it took too long for me to get invested in any kind of the storytelling, and just bouncing from POV to POV where everyone kind of was in combat all the time. I just couldn't get into it. And that's unfortunate because, again, this gave me such vibes of Destiny and Mass Effect and all these things that I love. And I don't know, I couldn't feel it. I didn't really care about any of the characters, to be honest. The main villain was kind of mustache twirly and a little bit on the nose. And I don't know. It was like a 3-ish start. It was fine. I didn't actively hate it. I didn't love anything about it. It was okay. There was never that thing that got me into it. Yes, this is what I want to be reading. So I just kept putting it down. And that's unfortunate. And I know there's people that like it far more than I have. There's plenty of reviews for the book that speak much more highly of it. So maybe you'll enjoy it. It didn't do it for me. And speaking of books that didn't do it for me, that was louder than I expected. Children of Dune. So if you know me and my channel, I love Dune. I've talked about it multiple times on the channel. I reviewed and loved the movie. So I've continued with the series, and this is where I'm going to stop for now, because I get this. I get the sentiment that you want to read Dune Messiah to finish Paul's arc, in a sense, to get a real feel for where we left off at the conclusion of Dune. I actually disliked how Messiah handled a lot of things. You get a more fully fleshed out path forward of Paul from Dune, but just some of the stuff that they skip over and gloss over, I wanted to see. And then you already get the little bit of cool weird of Dune, and then this is kind of getting a little bit silly weird of Dune, in my opinion. And Dune Messiah was okay. And then I got the Children of Dune, which, if you know the story so far, you understand who you're going to be following in this. And there was a lot of there's a lot of preachiness in this at points. It takes on a much more religious tone and philosophy, almost devoid of plot at some points because of it. And I feel like each of these books now is just assassination attempt after assassination attempt for several characters. You start to get really, really weird sci-fi things happening that if you're into really strange things happening, cool, you might really enjoy this. Each book for me since Dune has gotten progressively worse. Now again, I didn't totally hate this book. I didn't really like it though, and I understand that where we left off here, God Emperor gets even more strange, and then I barely ever hear great things about Heretics or Chapter House. I think I will eventually continue, but I'm not itching to continue. So I'm not going to read God Emperor anytime soon. I will at some point. I will continue, but these sequels are interesting. I definitely see Dune as a fantastic standalone. If you want to finish a certain arc, you can with Dune Messiah, but I don't know. I'm not quite sure about these so far. All right, some stuff that I did like though. Abaddon's Gate. So book 3 of, I was about to say book 3 of Leviathan Falls. That would have been interesting. That's not even, that makes no sense in any planet. So Abaddon's Gate, book 3 of The Expanse, I think is actually my favorite so far of the first 3 books. I loved Leviathan and Wakes, and then, what was book 2 called? What was the title? Caliban's War. I thought Caliban's War was okay. I still liked it overall, but not quite as much as Leviathan Wakes. This one takes on almost like there's a very real human-on-human struggle in this book that I really liked that the central plot revolved around. It wasn't strictly focused on like chasing the proto-molecule, which, book 1 was, and then you get the expansion of characters in book 2, and you're still kind of focusing on that. Yeah, it's still here. It's still a super important thing to this world and plot, but this was a lot more, I feel like, about the characters sort of going back and forth at each other. And I didn't love all of the characters that were introduced to this because I guess we're just going to get like a new cast of characters every book. And then you also have Holden and the crew. So that's cool. One of them I really didn't like at all to begin with. And then she grew on me over time. One was just kind of sucks. I don't like I understand that this is the character that you're going for. Anna is who I'm referring to. I don't like the super like preachy religious person, especially in this kind of world. It felt a little weird and out there. So she wasn't my most favorite to follow. Bull was fine. I didn't care one way or another too much about him. And then Melba was actually pretty interesting. So, and of course, Holden and the crew are fantastic. Some noticeable absences, though, is no Avasarala, no anybody else that was in the previous book or 2. So that's not true. There was a character that is here. That's all I'm going to say. But I want to get back to Avasarala and dealing with Mars and some of the political side of it, because I thought that was really well done in the last few books. But so far, so good with the series. I'm definitely excited to continue. I need to get some more of these in hardcover since I have the first 3 in hardcover. I'm absolutely going to continue. And I guess we're just going to keep getting new characters, which I really enjoy that. I also wish we would have a few more mainstays, I guess, rather than like Holden and the crew and then like 3 or 4 new POVs. Because book 2, you had Bobby, Avasarala, and then the guy whose name I'm forgetting, but like joins the crew for a little bit. This one, you have 3 new POVs, and then Holden. I think that was it. Anna, Bull, Melba, and then Holden. So I have no idea moving forward if we're just going to get 3 or 4 new POVs and then Holden again, or how that's going to play. But I want to see some of these characters kind of grow throughout the series that aren't just the crew. But the crew dynamics I love. Of course, Naomi, Alex, Amos, Holden, they're all fantastic. Their dialogue is always great. I love that they're always at the center of pretty much everything that's bad going on with the world in the Expanse, and Holden's always getting blamed for everything. It's pretty great. But yeah, I'm really enjoying it. I like the dialogue. I like the sort of gritty feel that we get at times and moments throughout the series, and it's really interesting. No, it's not like I know some people don't like it because it seems like it's sort of straightforward sci-fi, I guess, but I enjoy the hell out of it for what it is. It's certainly not weird like Children of Dune was. I don't need everything to be out there and crazy. And there's a lot of cool concepts that they go into in these books so far. So I'm enjoying it, and I'm excited to get to book 4. And of course, if you've been following the channel, Jimmy, Leanna, and I continue our A Song of Ice and Fire reread, which was A Clash of Kings. I hosted that live chat on my channel. So I'm not going to be doing any spoiler-free or even just solo reviews for any of these guys. I read these books a long time ago. We're all doing a reread, and I don't want to do spoiler-free reviews on my channel. And my live chats serve as my reviews for those. We've spoken between the first 2 books for 5.5 hours already. So, I mean, there's plenty of content there. Currently reading through A Storm of Swords because that'll be on Jimmy's channel. But the read along or the reread, sorry, is great. I love these chats. I love refreshing my memory about what was in the books versus what was actually in the show, because the show is most of what's in my memory right now, simply because it was more recent, and it's been a while since I've read these. But the writing is fantastic, and I really, really hope we get wins. George has a way with words, and I say that both as a compliment and as some of the things that you write, sir, make me cringe. Usually in the sex scenes. But I love the characters. Jamie is fantastic, and you finally start to get POV in Storm of Swords, which you don't get here. But what George does is so brilliant with these characters that even the ones that you don't get a POV for directly yet, even, or at all. So, like, you have Peter Baelish, you have Varys, you've got Jamie. So many of these characters, Rob, like, so many of these characters are incredibly well-rounded and interesting, and you don't even get a POV for them. So one that helps keeps the mysterious element to them, but it really makes you wish that you had a POV, which is, again, something that I appreciated about the show, is giving us those POVs that we never got to see. But the ones that you do follow, of course, are fantastic. Tyrion is one of the greatest characters in fantasy that's been written. As I said, Storm of Swords really starts Jaime's chapters where you actually get to follow him in his head and not just see him through the Stark's eyes, essentially. Bran is fine. I don't mind him too much, but he gives you a lot of the weirder elements of A Song of Ice and Fire and some of the magic. And same with Daenerys. Sansa's are probably the most boring chapters just because of who she is as a character, but she's still really well written and is serving the purpose to the story of being that sort of naive little princess that doesn't understand what's going on in the world around her and has a very rude awakening. There's not like an abundance of combat in these books. There's not an abundance of action at all, really. Like, there's some skirmishes here or there. George does not focus on combat. This is not a John Gwynne. You're not having, large-scale epic battles all the time. And when they do happen, you either pan away from it or you touch on it and then you come back to it later. It's never like Battle at the Whispering Wood. You don't see it. You don't see really any of the battles that Rob is in because he's not a POV. The Battle of Blackwater Bay, you get some of it, and it's really, really well done. But you don't get what you would get on like a big screen or even in the show where they spend so much time on it because it's not really the focus. And something that happens later in the series, like Hardhome. Hardhome was an entire episode of the TV show. It just like happens in the book. So it's cool that he can keep it so interesting without even really showing you all this combat that's happening, because he doesn't need to. It's like you're itching for more pages in these giant books. I mean, A Storm of Swords is a lot longer than this, but you're itching for more pages and dialogue and the politics and the backstabbing and all the plots within plots and schemes within schemes that are in these books, because they're so well done. And the way that George drips in information without being an exposition dump and gives you lore in really smart ways, and even at the very beginning of a Game of Thrones, showing you things that aren't going to necessarily pay off until 3 books later. So much foreshadowing, so many great characters, the dialogue's fantastic, the world feels fully realized. I love everything about these books, and coming back to it has been super refreshing because I don't normally reread things in general at all, but this is one that I'm incredibly happy to come back to and reread. Downside to these illustrated editions, though, I think these are the anniversary edition ones. A Game of Thrones is chock full of fantastic black and white illustrations every single chapter, and then also colored, different pictures colored throughout, has the most illustrations by far. Clash of Kings already cut back on how many illustrations were in it, and then they just duplicate them black and white in color. Some of them are great, some of them, not so much. A Storm of Swords, I really don't like it. I feel like they completely changed the art style. It is a totally different style that I'm not into, where, let me just pull it up real quick. First of all, there's a lot less illustrations. So if you're into buying these, there are significantly less illustrations, and they're done in this, I don't know how well this is going to show up on the camera. You can always pull these up online, but it's almost like they like draw a picture and then it's just kind of like scratched over it. So everything's just kind of this like scratchy, weird, kind of out of focus. I don't even know what style art it is, but there's so much less in that one, and I don't like the ones that are in it. So I haven't even looked through book 4 doesn't exist yet, that's why. They haven't done 4 and 5 yet in those illustrated editions. I really hope they switch up the artwork and get back to giving us tons and tons of artwork, because it's super disappointing so far. Books 2 and 3 are getting worse as far as the art's concerned. The books are perfect. Nothing wrong with the book, just the art. And last but not least, my Patreon pick that won the Wheel of Fortune, copyright, The Night Watch by Sergei Lukyanenko. This is book 1 of the Night Watch trilogy. So Nick has been hounding me to start this series, and I actually really enjoyed this book. It was a pleasant surprise. It's a Russian-based, sort of like Russian-inspired, early or late 90s urban fantasy. So when I made the joke reading it as J.K. Rowling Russian style, this shit has nothing to do with J.K. Rowling. I don't understand who wrote that or why. J.K. Rowling, to me, at least all I've read is Harry Potter, so this is nothing like Harry Potter. Whatever else she's read, did she write some like 90s urban fantasy that I don't know about? Perhaps. But you follow Anton, and the vibe that I got from reading the back of the book was not really what I was expecting the actual book to be. You've got the Night Watch, and every book consecutive is like the Day Watch, the Twilight Watch. There's different watches that are in existence, but you have the others that kind of live opposite of humanity. They kind of live in this like separate realm that's parallel to the real world. They can step in and out of it. I believe it was called the Twilight. Am I making this up? Pretty sure it was called the Twilight. But that introduces the dynamic. It's kind of like the Upside Down in a way, where it's just like an alternate, not an alternate reality, but it lives in parallel. Sort of like the Never Never in the Dresden Files. But Anton is a young sort of recruit that owes his allegiance to the light of the Night Watch, and there's also the dark side. So like there's the light and the dark side of the watch. They have various differings of opinion on how to, broker this peace between the two sides, and who should run what and how. So it actually leads to a lot of gray characters and lots of interesting and sort of thought-provoking dialogue between the two sides, because these two factions believe very different things of how they should operate. And one isn't necessarily the big bad. Like the dark is not necessarily inherently bad. The light's not inherently good. Like there's bad seeds in both. And you have a lot of this dynamic of back and forth of, who is actually good and who's not. So that was really refreshing to see and sort of surprising. As far as it being true to Moscow or Russia of the time that it's like trying to be set in, I have no idea. I'm assuming it's done a pretty good job, because most reviews that I've looked up after the fact say that it does a very good job of sort of being true to Russia in this time period that it's trying to be set in. So that was really interesting. There is some super cool magic that happens in this. And honestly, one of my favorite things about it is just going in and out of the Twilight, how you perceive the world around you. Because I mentioned this to Nick, there was a specific scene where the light and the dark are having a conversation in like a restaurant surrounded by people. So like just normal humans are in this restaurant. I'm holding the book for some reason. And you can sort of like, I don't know, put like a shroud around you, or make people see things so like they're not paying attention to the others that are sitting right there having a conversation. So it's almost like you put up like an image or like a mirage to basically like distract them. So Anton is doing it, and because he's the light, like he has his way of doing it. So it's much more subtle. He's just kind of like making people ignore him and not look at him and just not be aware of their surroundings. And then the dark comes in to talk to him, and they make everybody go crazy. They're throwing shit, they're smashing things, they're like fighting. They have very different approaches to how to handle the situation. So that was a lot of fun. You get some, cool chase scenes in this, and just smaller scale urban fantasy combat, where like Dresden Files, you don't get to, big battles until much later in the series. And I kind of get that feeling here, where you're getting introduced to the world and the magic and these different, wizards that sort of exist, and just how they interact. And you get these smaller, focused combat moments. You meet Svetlana, who is the other character that you're kind of following in this, where she's super powerful, and they're trying to understand exactly why and who she is. So there's just a lot of intrigue here, and the format of the book was surprising as well, because I guess it's technically 3 novellas put into one. So I'll have to check with Nick. I don't know if they were published separately and then put into a single book, but there's like a book 1, 2, and 3, and they each have like chapters 1 to 15, and then that like ends, and then you have like book 2, chapter 1 to 15. So it was definitely interesting. They're not all the same level of strength, I guess. I think book 2 had like the best moments in it. It was a book 2, part 2, whatever, however it was divided. It might have been just called chapter 2. No, it was, here it is. It was story. So it's story 1, 2, and 3. But you do learn that there's several sequels. So this says this is volume 1 of the Night Watch trilogy. So that's probably why it's called volume. But there's 3 of them, and then I believe he did a second trilogy, so I think there's 6, if not 7. It basically started out as a trilogy and then expanded. But I'm definitely interested in continuing. I'm going to order some more of these, at least books 2 and 3, and read them and see how I feel. But yeah, definitely check this out. If you like urban fantasy and you want to get something that's maybe a little bit different than you are used to, because I've never read anything from a Russian author, as far as I remember, and it being set in Moscow, it was a little bit alien to me, just like the setting and certain, familiarities that I wouldn't have. Like, it's always been kind of like a stereotype that Russians drink vodka. There's a lot of vodka in this book, so maybe that's true. But I really enjoyed it, and this wrapped up my month of books that was kind of up and down, but once I hit the stride of like getting past The Dark That Dwells in Children of Dune, it was great. So I really enjoyed it. That was what I read in November. We're already into December, where I'm getting through A Storm of Swords, that big boy, and I'm trying to get into do Android's Dream of Electric Sheep, which I read like 25 pages, and I was like, this is kind of weird, but I'm going to read it and see how I feel. I need to get through that one and form an opinion. So that's what I read. Hopefully you all enjoy your reads in the month of December. Enjoy your holiday, whatever you may celebrate. Enjoy it. I will be back with a couple more videos this month, which will also include probably a World Hoppers video or 2, which I just did one on Wheel of Time. And then we'll have a Song of Ice and Fire discussion of A Storm of Swords coming up here soon as well. So enjoy, take care, peace.